Sedona burned for almost a month this summer. Firefighters finally beat back the flames, the famous canyon road reopened, and everyone breathed easy. Then the rain came, the creek turned black, and the water started rising. It started small. On the evening of June 19th, a fire sparked about 7 miles north of Sedona, up in Oak Creek Canyon. At first, it was only around 100 acres. Crews hit it fast with hotshot teams, engines, and a dozer. But this canyon is steep and thick with fuel, and the fire had other plans. Within days, it exploded past 5,000 acres. They named it the Pocket Fire. It climbed the canyon walls and pushed toward the high country. State Route 89A, the beautiful drive linking Sedona and Flagstaff, was shut down completely. Evacuations went out across Oak Creek Canyon. Homes, campgrounds, and resorts emptied out. Nearly 1,000 personnel were fighting the blaze, and for a while it sat at 0% contained. The fire kept growing until it covered more than 27,000 acres. That is over 40 square miles of forest, most of it along the steep slopes above the creek. Much of it burned high on the Mogollon Rim, pronounced Mogollon, and inside the west fork of Oak Creek. That location matters, and you will see exactly why in a few minutes. The closure of 89A dragged on. Days became weeks. The road that carries millions of visitors through the Red Rock Canyon stayed silent for nearly a full month while crews held the line. Finally, on July 13th, the highway reopened. The fire was mostly contained. Business owners and locals were thrilled. They told visitors the canyon was still gorgeous and it was safe to come back. For less than a week, everything felt normal again. Cars rolled through the switchbacks. Tourists lined up at Slide Rock. Then the sky over northern Arizona changed, and the monsoon season showed up. Over one weekend, thunderstorms dumped more than an inch of rain directly onto the fresh burned scar. And that is when this story stopped being about fire and started being about water. The rain swept ash, branches, rocks, and soil straight down into Oak Creek. The clear blue water that draws crowds every summer turned dark and gritty, running black through the bottom of the canyon. At Forest Houses Resort, which sits right above the creek, the family who owns it said floodwater reached roughly 5 feet at their main entrance crossing. 5 feet, in a place that had just burned. Officials closed the creek again. Less than a week after 89A reopened, the Forest Service shut down the stretch of Oak Creek from West Fork down to Sedona. Slide Rock closed its water access too. So here is the strange part. How does a canyon that spent a month on fire suddenly become one of the most dangerous flood zones in the state almost overnight the moment it rains? The answer is something scientists call the fire-flood cycle. It is not bad luck, and it is not coincidence. Fire and flood are directly connected, and one sets up the other every single time. To understand it, picture a healthy forest before any fire. When rain falls, it lands on leaves, pine needles, grass, and shrubs. All of that greenery softens the blow and slows the water down. That water then soaks gently into the soil. Plant roots hold the dirt in place, and the ground acts like a sponge. Most of the rain sinks in instead of running across the surface. Now burn that forest down. The leaves, needles, grass, and roots are gone. There is nothing left to catch the rain or hold the soil together. But the real change happens underground. Plants and pine needles are full of natural waxes and oils. When a fire burns hot, those waxy compounds vaporize. The gas sinks a few inches into the soil, hits cooler ground, and cools. As it cools, that vapor condenses into a waxy coating around the soil grains. It forms a thin water repellent layer just below the surface. Scientists call this hydrophobic soil, meaning water-fearing. Now the same ground that used to drink in rain refuses to take any. The water hits that baked, waxy crust and simply cannot soak through. It has nowhere to go but sideways and down. One scientist described rain on a burned scar in a memorable way. Each drop lands almost like a tiny bomb. On green forest, the energy is absorbed, but on bare, charred ground, it hits hard. That impact loosens ash and dirt, and the water starts carrying it. As more rain falls and cannot sink in, it gathers speed across the slope, picking up soil, ash, rocks, and burnt branches. This is where the geography of the canyon turns dangerous. Remember that much of the pocket fire burned on the steep slopes of the Mogollon Rim, high above the narrow floor of Oak Creek Canyon. Gravity does the rest. All that fast-moving water and debris funnels down the steep walls and collects in one narrow channel at the bottom. That channel is Oak Creek itself, the heart of the canyon. The west fork of Oak Creek, which took some of the heaviest burning, drains straight into the main creek. So the most damaged ground feeds directly into the water everyone loves to swim in. That is why the creek ran black. What poured through was a moving slurry of ash, soot, silt, and burnt debris, all washing off the scar and choking the once clear stream until it looked like ink. And these are not gentle floods. When water carries that much material, it becomes a debris flow. It moves heavier, hits harder, and can shove rocks, logs, and mud across roads and into yards. There's a hidden danger in that black water too. After the last big fire here, testing found sharp spikes in bacteria like E. coli, pronounced E. coli, washed into the creek from the burned land. So even when the floodwater looks like it is clearing, it may still be unsafe to touch or drink. That is a big reason officials closed creek access instead of just warning people about it. The National Weather Service issued flash flood warnings for the burned scar. Radar showed storms dropping more than an inch of rain over the fire area in a short window, with more on the way. These warnings covered Oak Creek Canyon, Slide Rock State Park, parts of Sedona, and remote spots like the Red Rock Secret Mountain Wilderness. The danger stretched far beyond the exact patch of ground that burned. Here is a detail that makes the timing even worse. This all hit during peak tourist season. Business owners in the canyon said the flooding and closures scared visitors away right when they earned the most. A Forest Service hydrologist gave the blunt truth. With the storms rolling through now and the ones still coming, elevated flooding in the West Fork and Oak Creek is expected for the rest of monsoon season. And there is a reason it keeps happening again and again. Monsoon storms are small, often only about 5 square miles. The burn scar is much bigger, so no single storm soaks the whole thing at once. So one storm hits the eastern side and flushes debris into the creek. A few days later, another storm hits a different part of the scar and does it all over again, load after load. That is the trap. It is not one flood and done. It is a repeating pattern of storm, then black water, then closure, then a short break, then the next storm doing the same thing. Experts stress that none of this is unusual. Running black water and debris flows are exactly what they see after almost every wildfire. It is textbook behavior just playing out in a very famous place. To measure the risk, a special crew called a Burned Area Emergency Response Team flew over the scar and walked the ground. Their job is to figure out how badly the soil and slopes actually burned. Their early read brought some good news. The pocket fire mostly burned at low intensity, not the scorching high severity that creates the worst water-repellent soil. That lowers the odds of truly catastrophic flooding. But low intensity does not mean no risk. The team was clear that the fire still raised the chance of flash flooding, especially in the steep West Fork drainage that pours right into Oak Creek. County flood control officials stayed cautious. They had crews and equipment ready to move, but hoped they would not need the full-scale response that other, hotter burn scars in Arizona had forced them into. Now here's the part that should give you chills. This exact canyon has been through this exact story before. The pocket fire is not the first time Oak Creek Canyon burned and then flooded. Rewind to May 20th, 2014. A fire broke out along the west side of Oak Creek near the halfway picnic area, just upstream from Slide Rock. People called it the Slide Fire. It moved fast. Within a day, it raced up the west wall of the canyon and started climbing the side canyons toward the rim. The whole canyon was evacuated within about an hour. The Slide Fire burned 21,227 acres before crews contained it 16 days later. At the time, it was the largest fire in the recorded history of the Coconino National Forest. Look at the pattern. Same canyon, same west side slopes. The fire again climbed the Mogollon Rim and burned through the same tall ponderosa pine. The terrain set up the exact same funnel toward the creek. After the Slide Fire, the same flood threat took over. State Route 89A had to be closed several times as flooding and debris washed across the burn area. The transportation crews scrambled to keep it open. They fought the debris with straw-filled tubes called wattles, along with rock dams and log barriers, all meant to slow the runoff and keep mud and rocks off the highway during storms. And just like today, the creek itself paid the price. Monsoon flooding after the Slide Fire pushed bacteria levels in Oak Creek so high that officials warned even clear-looking water might not be safe. But here is a twist that explains a lot. After the Slide Fire, the flooding was not as bad as many feared. And the reason was simple. The big monsoon storms mostly did not show up. That is the missing piece. A burn scar is loaded and dangerous, but it needs rain to actually flood. In 2014, the scar was primed, yet the skies stayed relatively dry, so the worst never came. The pocket fire is not getting that lucky. This time the monsoon arrived strong and early, dropping storm after storm right onto fresh burn scar. The trigger the slide fire lacked is here in full force. So the same canyon that survived 2014 without major flooding is now getting the version that hurts. Same setup, same water repellent soil, but this year the rain is actually falling on it hard. There is one more thing you should know, and it is oddly hopeful, that water repellent crust does not last forever. As the soil settles and roots and grasses return, the ground slowly regains its grip. After the slide fire, a soil scientist tested this in a clever way. He poured a little water on the ground and counted the seconds. If it soaked in within 10 seconds, absorbency had returned. If the water beat it up and took much longer, the hydrophobic crust was still there and the flood risk stayed high. 1 year after the slide fire, much of that soil had finally started drinking again. So the danger window is real but temporary. The most dangerous stretch is the first monsoon season or two after a fire before plants grow back. The pocket fire scar is sitting right inside that window now. Step back and you can see the full shape of it. Fire strips the slopes bare and bakes the soil. Monsoon rain arrives and cannot soak in. Water and debris pour down into the creek. Then repeat. And Oak Creek Canyon is almost perfectly built to suffer from it. Steep walls, a narrow floor, a single creek at the bottom, and a fire history that keeps setting the whole thing off again. 2 major fires in about 12 years, both on the same slopes, both feeding the same water. This is not one disaster. It is a cycle the canyon keeps moving through, fire then flood, over and over. For anyone who loves Sedona, this matters in practical ways. During monsoon season, after a fire, a sunny morning can turn into a flash flood by afternoon, even if it is not raining where you stand. Rain falling miles away, high on the burn scar, can send a wall of water and debris down the canyon toward hikers standing in bright sunshine. That is what makes post-fire flooding so deceptive. It is why officials close the creek and post flash flood warnings that can feel like overkill on a clear day. They are not watching your sky. They are watching the sky above the burn scar. The good news is that Sedona itself, the town, is not underwater. Most of the red rock icons like Cathedral Rock and Bell Rock are open. The trouble is concentrated in the canyon below the burn. Over the coming months, the scar will start to heal. Grasses will sprout, roots will spread, and the soil will slowly learn to drink again. Each monsoon season after this one should bring a little less risk. But for this summer, the canyon is stuck in the dangerous stretch. The soil is baked, the vegetation is gone, and the storms are coming. Every heavy rain is a fresh chance for the creek to run black. So the headline really is true. Sedona burned for nearly a month, and now the floods have started. Both statements describe the same canyon in the same season, linked by one simple chain of cause and effect. The fire did not just burn trees, it changed the ground, so the next rain behaves like an enemy instead of a gift. And this canyon has now shown us that same trap twice in one lifetime. So if you visit Sedona this summer, respect the closures and watch the weather above the burn, not just around you. The views are still stunning. The canyon is just reminding everyone that fire and flood travel together.